Just people are so, at times can be so closed-minded based on
Yep.
their own skills and their own abilities that they want to project that stuff on you.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot not to let that happen, because sometimes it's easy to hear it, right? Sometimes it's easy to fall victim to what others say. You don't crush kids' dreams. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we live in a world now where you can do anything. You can be an Instagram model. Like, you can make money from
Yeah.
the internet. Right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
those careers didn't exist a long time ago. But who am I to tell somebody that they can't be, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
If you're willing to work for it, you can be it. Now, understand it's
Exactly.
going to take work, but you can definitely achieve it. And for me, that was so crushing at a time when I needed support.
Yeah.
To not get it from a person that I thought was supposed to be a supportive person.
Hola, everyone. Let's start healing. I'm Adrienne Murchison, and welcome to episode 69 of the Let's Start Healing podcast. We have more in common than you think, and what we have in common can change the world. I'm here today in a conversation with a really deep man, Dr. Gabriel Marshall. He is many things. He's an author, he's an academic, an educator, a mentor, many, many things. And he's author of the book, Letters of a Confused Graduate, Volume 1. In our conversation, Gabriel is going to share a little bit about his book, which really depicts some of his experiences early in his career. Gabriel is Assistant Vice President and Senior Advisor for Student Success and Retention at Buffalo State College, and he lives in Rochester, New York. In our conversation, he's talking spirituality, overcoming self-doubt, overcoming loss, personal loss, and inspiring others. It's just a really, really nice conversation. Let me share a little bit about Gabriel before we get started. As I mentioned, he's from Rochester, New York. He was born and raised there. He completed his bachelor's degree in English from Damon College in 2005. And he has a master's of science in education and counseling, as well as a certificate of advanced study in mental health counseling from the State University of New York College at Brockport. In May 2019, before the pandemic, he completed his doctorate degree in executive leadership at St. John Fisher College. He lives in Rochester with his wife and 2 children. And after everything I just shared in terms of his credentials, one of the things that Gabriel shares in our conversation is how he really had a passion and a drive to be a comedian when he was younger. So that's very interesting. I'm just really looking forward to you getting to know him. So let's meet him. Let's get started and let's start healing.
Welcome, Gabriel.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Congratulations on this book.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a long time coming. I started this in 2007, and it just got finished in 2021. And I finished it about really October of
Last year.
2020.
So describe the book.
The book started out, and this is going back to 2007. I lost my job in January of 2007. And at the time, we're getting ready to, my girlfriend and I had just planned a trip to go to Mexico. So right before we go to Mexico, I lose my job. And
Did you still go?
We did still go. But I was so frustrated. Before we went, a friend of mine said, hey, you know, this is a bad time. It's the middle of the winter. And they're like, well, why don't we take a trip to a summer retreat? So we go on this trip, and there's no running water. There's no anything. And like, well, what are we going to do? And I had an empty book with me. Mm-hmm. So I just started to write all of what I'm experiencing from losing that job and just the frustration and kind of detail that turn of events. And I'm thinking about the conversations that I've had with my dad, with my mother, my grandmother, my aunts, uncles, mentors, my brothers, sisters. And I said, what would they have said to me to get me back focused and thinking positive versus being negative?
And that's where you have the exchange in letters, is that how, with Isaiah and Aaron in the book, which are different chapters? What you say? Or
They were just letters. So it would
letters.
be one letter from Aaron and then a response from Isaiah.
How would you describe what you felt? Like, can you recall, what you were going through?
And I'll give you a little taste of some of my thinking, right? So my daughter's born at this time. My girlfriend and I are going through a number of different issues of, is she the one, is she not the one? Do we want to be together? Do we not? Do we move in together? All of this stuff is kind of swirling. So for me, it was kind of self-healing instead of keeping all of these feelings in. And mind you, I'm going through my counseling master's program at this time. And in our counseling program, as much as we're working on counseling others, we have to go to counseling as a part of our program, as a requirement. So I'm going through this counseling and I'm really opening myself up to really examine who I am as a person, who I want to be as a professional, and how am I going to get through these steps. So really having, I look at it as almost self-counseling, but really having, difficult conversations with myself,
right?
Being able to open up to people like I never have before. And instead of keeping all of this stuff down, let's start writing it. And not only myself, but I'm looking at my peers, I'm looking at my classmates, siblings, looking at some of the experiences that they're going through. And I said, hey, these experiences are stuff that everyone's going to be able to relate to.
Right.
Why not share some of these experiences with people?
Right.
And then be able to give them that guidance to know no matter what you're going through, you can pull through it, right? As long as you keep God first, you're going to be able to get through it because God's not going to give us anything that we can't handle.
You're Aaron in the book.
So
is
no,
right?
Right?
No?
I would say no. I would say Aaron is.
I thought you were Aaron.
and a lot of people have said that to me. But no, Aaron is a combination of people. You could say that I would originally, the concept of Aaron was me and something I was going through, but then it started to evolve because so many people were going through situations that I wanted to tell that story. So I could not just make it singularly about myself.
So are you and your wisdom and vulnerability in both Aaron and Isaiah? Or is it, because I know you said you have like your parents, your grandparents.
I would say there's pieces of me in both cases. Yeah.
And you also talk about death a little bit. Is the grandmother your grandmother that you're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay. And it seems like that hit you pretty deeply, the loss of her.
Yeah, it did. It still, honestly, it still affects me to this day. So I have a tattoo. I have a picture of my grandmother with her name and, her dates. But her and I were just extremely close. Even ever since I was a kid. I go to college in New Jersey. I come back and I end up going to school in Buffalo, which is great because my grandmother lives in Buffalo. So it really gives us time. And this is not being a kid, right? I'm 19, 20, 21 years old. But I can really take the time to go out and see her, to go to church with her, to take her to a doctor's appointment, to go grocery shopping. Yeah. But to actually just sit and listen. When we look at our family, especially my mother's side, there's such a rich history within our family. And that's the stuff that she would really let me know. My
history of?
The history of so much in terms of, coming from down south, but the people who are in our family that have made, contributions to American history.
Yeah.
Right?
Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So one of my cousins, her name is Dorothy Cotton, and I mentioned her in the book, right? She was the first only woman in Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s cabinet. And she was phenomenal. She was one of the leaders in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, but just a super special woman. I've had a chance to sit down and talk with her a number of times. And I was fortunate to bring my daughter up to meet her. She lived in Cornell. In Ithaca. So at Cornell, they have a big a museum, if you will, named in her honor. And she's was just amazing. So here and there, I have one of my other uncles, he published a book about black cowboys in Texas.
Oh, really?
But it's stuff that you just don't know.
Yeah.
And for me, between watching Matlock, and my grandmother could cook too. So anything that she wanted, homemade. So fresh breads, biscuits, mac and cheese, peach cobblers, desserts, anything you wanted, she could cook. So we're out there, and it's really, for me, a connection that I've never had with anyone. So in that time, to really share those moments and share those experiences, to me, was really the best thing. It was the best time, right? We go through undergraduate, graduation, my grandmother's there. shortly after graduation, she passes away.
Wow.
And it really hit me because I had never had anyone close to me really pass away. Someone that I spent a significant amount of time with that was really influential in my life.
Was it unexpected?
Well, no, it was. I mean, we knew her health was deteriorating in some ways.
Yeah.
But I think for me, and at this time, I mean, I'm 21 years old, 22 years old, the space that I was in mentally, it wasn't very mature. I think the friend group, and I'm not a person who has a lot of friends, but I have loyal friends in terms of these are the people that I've grown up with or known since second or third grade.
Yeah.
So I don't need a lot of friends because I have friends that I know are my real friends.
Yeah, you have a close circle.
Exactly. And what happened was, you know, and at the time, I would say almost disappointed in myself for some of the decisions that we were making, right? And my grandmother knew about some of that because I'd never lied to her. So she knew every detail of everything. And she would always tell me, you need to get God in your life. You need to really take the time to get to know your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And we would have so many of those conversations. And when my mother called me and she said, I just want you to know your grandmother's going in the hospital. So I knew that she wasn't doing well, but at the time I didn't fully understand what all of that meant.
Yeah.
So my girlfriend and I went to go see her. It was maybe a Friday. We go see her. She seemed to be doing okay. Right? We leave, and probably within a week, because it didn't even get to the next week, and she passed away. It may have been like a Saturday. My mother made a call me about 3 or 4 in the morning on the next Saturday. And I kid you not, everything just went blank. And there was a numbness to it, right? It just a feeling of this person is no longer here. But when you think about all of the memories and all of the conversations, and I dedicated the book to her because she has been, or was and still is, so influential in who I am as a person, how it shaped me. I think the biggest piece, so prior to her passing away, right after graduation, I take my girlfriend to meet her. This is her first time meeting her, and I'm a little bit nervous, you know. My wife at the time, well, she's my wife now, but her and my mother, I would say they weren't the best of friends, or they didn't hit it off. So I said, you need to meet my grandmother. If my grandmother approves, then we're good. If my grandmother doesn't approve,
we're not good.
Yeah. So when I get there, we go to Buffalo to visit her. It's probably about 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And I say, hey, I'm going to go visit my friends at the college that I went to. So I leave. And I'm gone. I don't come back until about 4 o'clock in the morning. But when I get back, they're literally sleeping in the bed together.
Wow.
And like they helped my grandmother with a bath, helped her cook, you know, fed her, washed her hair, did her hair. They're sitting there, they watched Matlock, they did all of these things. And when my grandmother wakes up in the morning, she's like, she's a keeper. And we've been together ever since. But it was, I think that type of one, love, respect, but also relationship that we had built. Where it was, you know, she was just that person, not only for me, but for our entire family.
Yeah.
It was, and then to make it even worse, so she has a sister, and I also dedicated the book to her sister as well, who's my other, if you will. Her and I were really close. She lived in Long Island. And when she passed away, it was like a double whammy. My grandmother and then my aunt, and these two were, I mean, they were sisters, but they were best friends. And when it came to our family structure, we have our family reunions are huge. And we're talking like the stuff of legends, right? And we've traveled all over the world. We've gone to Africa. We've been to the Bahamas. We've been to Hawaii. We've been, you know, all over. And that's the first thing I do when I get there is go get their luggage. I'm checking on them. I'm making sure that they're good. So to lose those two in close proximity, for me, it really put me in a dark place. Because it wasn't something that I was used to. I always joke with my wife, especially at that time, that I'm not even going to my own funeral. Like, I just am not going to be.
Yeah. You were grieving, though, you know. Grief can take you to a dark place.
Definitely. And it's just something now, you know, I'm learning to cope with it. I haven't had a lot of people close to me pass away. One of my best friends died recently.
Really?
Well, it was not recent. It was, like, 2015. But he was one of the people that I've grown up with since we were, grade school.
Yeah.
He passed away at 33. And,
wow.
And it was leukemia. And it sucks because after he passed about a year ago now, his best friend, we were all best friends, but his closest friend passed away as well from cancer. So you start to see this whole thing. For me, what it did really was, it really got me more serious about my relationship with God. It really made me a lot more focused as a parent in terms of sharing the word of God with my children, but also being present.
I'm curious, something that happens for me. I'm curious if this happens for you. I've had a lot of loss in my family.
Sure.
And I find that my relationship or my awareness of God deepens when I'm going through this grief or when the person goes. I mean, literally, the way I felt my mom's spirit when she left was incredible. But I'm just curious, like, did you have any kind of experience like that? Or I don't know if I'm explaining that or saying that clearly.
My grandmother, like I said, when just being in the hospital with her and hearing some of her talk about really being in this spiritual place and having a sense of calm. This is before she passed. For me, it kind of turned on the light, right? And I think she was 76 when she passed away. So it was like, I get it, but you've lived, so to speak, in some ways. When I watched my friends die, and so we were really close in age when all of this was happening, and to watch him on his deathbed with leukemia, not being able to do stuff, and I mean, he was a well-known, well-respected person in the Rochester community. So to watch the number of people come to the hospital, to see of anyone, this person in a really vulnerable state, for me, there was a lot of asking God why, right? But it was also, God doesn't make mistakes. So there has to be some healing through this.
And you're seeing love exchanged.
In a different way.
Yeah.
When you're with your friends as guys, you tell them you love them, right? I love you and this and that. But I think in those moments, to watch all of us come together, people we haven't seen in years.
Yeah.
To see men break down crying, to see, watching his parents go through this, right? Watching his siblings go through this. And his father's a pastor. His mother, they're very into the church. So to watch, I think the calm and the peace come over them and to listen to them pray, for me, and that was the one thing that he said to us was, take this time to strengthen your relationship with God, to strengthen your relationship with the Lord. And it was so relevant to me and so prevalent that this is what needs to happen.
Yeah. And how did you do that?
So normally, I would go to church, right? But it was going to church to me is just the act of going, right? It's not getting in tune with your spirituality. It's great to be in fellowship with other people, but if you are mentally focused on the word, that's where it really starts for me. So what I started to do was go to Bible study, right? My wife and I, we went together. So going through Bible study really helped me to start to understand. It's so cliche when you can quote certain parts of the Bible, and everyone can say them because certain scriptures are everywhere, but really understanding it, seeing how it connects to certain parts. How is it going to help me be a better father? How is it going to help me be a better husband? How is it going to be a better friend, sibling, brother? All of these different things. And what does God have planned for me? So it really changed the way that I pray. It really changed the way that I read the Bible. It also changed the way that I share the Bible with my kids, and not just my kids in terms of my actual children, but with students, that I work with in a college setting, right? Everything, and it doesn't have to be me forcing it down your throat, but really letting you know this is my faith and I'm very comfortable with.
Right.
We go to lunch sometimes or dinner, and some people won't pray over the meal. Well, I'm going to pray. That's just how I am, and I don't have to be loud or demonstrative with it. But it's knowing who I am, feeling comfortable with it, and feeling really comfortable in that relationship.
And well, first, I'm thinking all these questions I want to ask you as you're talking. How did you said you started praying in a different way? Like, in what way did you start praying, did you before?
I actually went and talked to my pastor about really how to pray, how to read the Bible. Before I just read it. So it's open to my own interpretation of how I'm seeing it. And what he broke down to me was, let's start with specific passages. But when you're reading, let's look at some of these questions that you should be asking yourself when you're reading. And that really gave me a lot of guidance because I had never done that before. So now when I'm reading this with certain questions in mind, I'm reading it differently because I'm looking for certain things. I'm interpreting the word differently because now I have a guide, if you will, that's helping me interpret or really understand what I'm reading.
And the reason I asked you is because one of my prayers includes asking God how I can serve.
Sure.
And how I can serve through this or that, or, and so I was just curious also if that's because you really are in a service business, you're in education. So you are serving, you're serving.
And the cool part about that is from being a counselor, you actually being a graduate student when I worked in a number of different offices, to then being a counselor with an education opportunity program, to then being a director, to having a number of other programs that I oversaw, to now being an assistant vice president, I really had a chance to have the gamut of experiences in terms of working with students. But not just students, working across the institution, to understand, you talk about being a servant, and how does servant leadership come into play. When parents drop their students off with us and they're entrusting them to us, it's such a cool responsibility, but it's a real responsibility. Right? And these people, a lot of times, I used to tell our staff this all the time, we're going to be some of the most successful people that some of these students may see or may know. So they're watching us in times that we don't even think that they're watching. So when we're doing certain things, we have to be mindful of that. The conversations that we have, even the jokes that we take. We live in such a, I don't want to say sensitive society, but it is. There's so many different things that really have to be nurtured. And the fact that, parents entrust in us with their child, being not only mindful of it, but taking that responsibility serious. Right?
Yeah.
And when I was young, I took it serious, but I was young, right? I'm 24 years old. Some of our students are 20. We're so close in age, we still have some of the same interests and some of the same hobbies that it's not the same.
But you're a father now, too.
Oh, correct.
So you understand what's precious.
Yeah, definitely.
So what do you think that God calls you to do for yourself and for others through your work?
Well, that's a great question. That's actually one of my prayers. And I ask God all the time, what do you want me to do? Lead me to where you want me to be and show me how you want me to lead, right? And I ask that prayer because in some instances, I'm not sure. But in other instances, it's like, as a young Black man who grew up in the city, who made tons of poor decisions, the one thing I always stuck to was my education. And it was a slow grind because going through education is not fast money by any stretch of the imagination. But what it does is it connects you with students in terms of people who are trying to grow, right? And I've only had, in all of my jobs since I've been 13 years old, I've always worked in the education setting. That's all I know.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you what drew you to education.
So honestly, my mother was in education. When I first started, I was a camp counselor. It wasn't difficult because I can work with people. I love working with people. I love talking to people. When I went to college, I had a few teachers in high school who were just phenomenal. And it made me say, well, I want to provide another student with the same experience that someone provided me.
Yeah.
Now, the thing with it was I didn't like school. I wanted to be a comedian growing up. That's all I ever wanted to be. All I ever wanted to be.
What?
So, for me, that once I would watch, Eddie Martin, Eddie Murphy, I was sold.
And do you have that natural humor dynamic in you?
I would think so. I hear that from people all the time. So for me, it is something that I can use in every setting.
Yeah.
But my counselor in high school used to tell me, when I told him this, he's like, that's not a real career. You're never going to be a comedian. Basically, hang it up. But it taught me a valuable lesson that anyone can negatively impact you and anyone can positively impact you.
That's so true. That's so true. Yeah. I mean, I know that also from experience because I'm a journalist and it was a second career.
Sure.
I definitely had people who told me I couldn't do it. It was only because of the people who believed in me that I was able to progress. Yeah.
People, I tell you, people teach you so much, and I talk about that in the book somewhat, right?
Yeah.
And just people are so at times can be so closed-minded based on
Yep.
their own skills and their own abilities that they want to project that stuff on you.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot not to let that happen, because sometimes it's easy to hear it, right? Sometimes it's easy to fall victim to what others say. You don't crush kids' dreams. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you live in a world now where you can do anything. You can be an Instagram model. Like, you can make money from
Yeah.
the internet. Right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
those careers didn't exist a long time ago, but who am I to tell somebody that they can't be, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
If you're willing to work for it, you can be it. Now, understand it's
Exactly.
going to take work, but you can definitely achieve it. And for me, that was so crushing at a time when I needed support,
Yeah.
to not get it from a person that I thought was supposed to be a supportive
Mm-hmm.
person. And I think for me, that kind of died down some of my, I guess, comedic talents or desires. So, okay, what else can I do? You know, I had a really, really good English teacher. And of all of my teachers, aside from my math teacher, my English teacher was the one who said, I'm reading your writing, like you have a gift in how you write and how you can tell stories.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever thought about being an English teacher? Never crossed my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But when I went to college, I excelled in English. So it was the one area where I could say, hey, I can actually do this teaching.
Yeah.
So that's what led me to teaching. And when I got to teaching, I really didn't like it. You know, and again, this just shows the youth, right? I'm 22 years old. I'm teaching English 12. I went back to my old high school. So I'm friends with all of the kids that I'm teaching. I'm friends with their older brothers
You're
and sisters.
teaching seniors at 22 years old.
Exactly. And
Wow.
I don't want to do lesson planning. Lesson planning takes a lot of time. Grading papers takes a lot of time. When I get out of work, I want to go home and relax with my friends.
Right, right. But you
and
get out early.
Well, no, because at that school we got out late, right?
Oh, no.
I'm like, this is not fun. I'm not trying to stay up until 6 or 7 o'clock and do work.
Uh-huh.
So I ended up going to the Career Center at my high school. And there was a woman there, Miss Russ, who was, when I was in high school there, she helped me get my first job.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, listen, have you ever thought about counseling and working with students on a one-on-one versus being in the classroom?
Yeah.
I said, no, I never have. So when I go to school, and after having this conversation, I go back to teach the next day, and the students are telling me how much they don't like their teachers. And we had our counselors come in and talk about going to college and doing applications, and they're like, I don't like my counselor either. My counselor doesn't care about me. My counselor's not this or not that. And for that time, it hit me because I had a similar experience in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And these kids don't need a teacher. They need a counselor who can relate to them and work with them.
Yeah.
So she really encouraged me to enroll in a master's program. I did that. I was accepted to that program. And I really loved counseling. You know, it really helped me, one, just feel good because I could see that I was making a difference for students.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the greatest joy. And it's happened so much where students reach out to me and say, I want you to know the impact that you've had on me, or how you helped me or how you shaped
So
certain
powerful,
perspective. And it couldn't have been better. What I didn't realize as a counselor, though, was I can't make the change that I want to see happen on a larger scale.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in a position to do so. And that's
as a counselor.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what really drove me to go into administration.
Mm-hmm.
I've been, as a counselor, I get a chance to see so much. But what I would ask my supervisor was, teach me about budget. Take me to certain meetings with you so I can understand the conversation, so I can be prepared to know how to address it.
What kind of things, needs were you saying? I mean, you mentioned budgets, but also when you really get down to, you know, the students, what kind of changes have you seen in the past that were needed?
Advocacy when it came to policy and procedures,
Mm-hmm.
equity, you know, how students are treated or what the expectations are. And if you see students, and this is regardless of race, right? But students who are coming in from low-income backgrounds, low-income, depending on where you're from, depending on your family structure, your experiences, there's already an expectation when you walk through the door. If you don't meet that expectation, now how are you treated? Are you frowned upon? You know, how do the professors respond to you? And in some of those instances, a lot of it's not a student's fault if they have not been prepared in certain ways. But as educators, it's our job to now prepare the student.
Yeah.
And are we actually doing it? Are our policies and our procedures really equitable for everybody?
Yeah.
A lot of times, even something simple as having a computer or having the internet, well, everyone does it. You know, so there's assumption, well, we're going to send everything out through electronic. Well, this person doesn't have the internet at home. They don't have a computer.
Yeah.
They need to get it by mail. Like, in just certain ways to advocate for students. You know, for me, I'm really big on inclusive excellence.
Mm-hmm.
but every policy is not inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
So who is going to be the person to step up and say that in a meeting and really say, let's examine this policy and let's make change?
And if you can't answer this question, it's fine.
Okay.
I'm curious, given what you're talking about last year, after the whole George Floyd murder, after that happened, was there a crossroads between administration at your school and, just where the country was and where students were and how students were impacted and feeling?
No, definitely. I think at Buffalo State, I really like the way they handled it because they acknowledged it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they provided safe spaces for students to talk, faculty, staff, but for people to really come together and talk about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talk about how it made you feel. Understand in Buffalo State, we have a big diverse population of students.
Yeah.
And not only for our students of color, but also white students, international students. But let's have these conversations because the more we talk about it, the more we can come to resolution.
Exactly.
We established a George Floyd Scholarship. I'm at Buffalo State.
Oh.
So there's a number of things that we've done. I was really proud of how we responded to it. I think, and for me, I don't get too much into the political stuff. I think there's certain people who handle those things. But I can say from my perspective, I thought we were proactive in how we approached the situation.
Yeah. And so going back to Letters of a Confused Graduate,
okay.
What is it that, what are some of the things that you would want the reader to walk away from, to take away from the book?
I would say that there's always going to be trials and tribulations in life, but focus on the things that you can control. So you can control your attitude, right? You can control how you prepare for things. I always say there's two ways to be in this world, either prepared or unprepared. So you can control if you're prepared, if you take the time to actually develop your craft or develop a certain skill set or whatever it's going to be. The willingness to ask for help, I think, comes through in this book because it's something that I had to learn to do. It's something that I watched other people have to learn to do. And you talk about being prepared, that's part of a skill set that you develop. Yeah.
You strike me, and I'm this way, you strike me as a natural empath.
Okay.
Are you? Do you think?
What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm trying to bring up this word for a reason. You care and are sensitive to other people's feelings and the dynamics of what they're going through. And I was thinking about that because that's a word that is coming up in the workplace. We're talking through Zoom. Yeah. And even as I was coming on Zoom, there was a little message from Zoom about how, you could go listen to like a Zoom call about empathy. And I just find that so strange. I know everyone isn't as deeply empathetic as on the same level. Everyone's not the same, but it just seems odd to me. Okay. That is something that we have to learn, that some people have to learn. That seems different.
So when I was younger, I was nowhere near as empathetic. What happened was in my quest to be a comedian, a lot of my jokes when I was younger was directed towards my little sister. And we're night and day in terms of I'm super silly, she's super serious. Right? Okay. And watching the impact that it had on her, and I talk about this a little bit in the book, but the impact that it had on her. And as we get older, she gets married, and her and I actually sit down and have a conversation, and she talks to me about the impact of some of these jokes and how stuff made her feel. Wow. And what I realize is what's funny to me is not funny to someone. Yeah. Understanding what people are going through, and people may walk around smiling, but you have no idea what they're going through.
That's so true.
So it's really understanding what people are going through, how they're dealing with it. Some people may be strong, some people may be weak, some people may be depressed, some people may master feelings. So who am I to not understand it, right? It doesn't matter. I used to always say to people, don't treat people the way you want to be treated. Treat them the way they want to be treated, right? So in order to do that, you got to get to know people.
I love that. Treat them the way they want to be treated.
Yeah, for sure, because they may not want to be treated the way that you want to. So,
right.
The more I started to take that approach and understand it, for me, I've always been one who's willing to listen. So the more I started to listen and understand people, it's like, wow, people are carrying some major stuff with them.
Yeah.
So for me, it's not up to me to poke fun at it or things like that, but to sincerely listen.
Yeah.
You know, and if I can help them, then to genuinely want to be there to help. And it's taken a long time to get there, you know, because before it wasn't like, and we're talking 25 years ago, that wasn't the same approach.
Right.
But, you know, I think I've personally gotten a lot further with it. I think people have been more willing now to open up and share. And from their experiences, you can learn so much. So I'm happy that it happened that way.
Yeah.
But it also taught me a lot in terms of the evolution, because the comedian or the joke side of me is always there. That sense of humor will never go away. But it's at whose expense, right?
Yeah.
When you come to people with empathy, you're going to get a lot further, because you can tell who's genuine.
Absolutely.
Working with students. Students they're not dumb at all.
Absolutely. And, you know, sort of related to this, how did you and your family, how have you navigated the pandemic? And if you're comfortable with it, how are you doing? We're still in a state of uncertainty.
Yeah, originally, it was very tough because to me, it slowed down my job. I had really just got started in this role. And this is an inaugural role at the college. So I was really, I don't say I felt pressure, but I put pressure on myself to really do a great job, to show them, one, they made the right hire, but two, I really know what I'm doing, and three, I can solve, if you will, this retention issue that we're facing, right?
Yeah.
And I'd only been there for 5 months when the pandemic started to hit. So everyone had to start working from home. And it's hard for me to just sit at home or sit behind a desk. I really wanted to be on campus, meeting people, talking with students, really understanding the culture, if you will. So that part was difficult. I mean, I started to learn and navigate it through virtual meetings and things like that, but it was a lot more difficult with students. And students were such a big piece of the work that I planned on doing.
And was there stress too, just by the nature of us being in, you know, dealing with this unknown disease?
It was, because you can't see anything. You never know who's got it, who's doing what. Everyone, and this is even before vaccination. At this time, I'm not into shots. Like I don't even get flu shots. Like I'm into, you know, eating good. I use like essential oils or things like that, but I'm not into putting all of this stuff into my body. So for us, it was a real lockdown, to the point where, because we don't know, we don't want to put others at risk.
Right.
We didn't go and see my wife's mother, her grandmother. We didn't go see my parents because they're older. It's like,
that's hard.
Potentially expose you. You know, our kids are young, so they want to see their grandparents. So we just couldn't do that. And for us, it was in some ways a responsible thing to do, but it was very hard. I think as it started to warm up, we would go see my parents, but we wear masks. We wouldn't even go in the house. We would stay outside, right?
Yeah.
So as we went through that process, but what it did do, though, was bring us closer together as a family. And we went through the times of people getting annoyed with each other because you're in such close proximity, but it had us together. And if there's anyone that you want to be with in this time, it's with your family. I was able to be with my kids every day. I was able to see, you know, my wife's routine every day when I'm not home. I was able to be home for dinner every day, eat breakfast with my kids. And I think for me, that was just the best thing, because I've been running nonstop for maybe the last 10 or 12 years. And, you know, getting 3 degrees, coaching basketball, doing training, like doing all this other stuff. So it gave me a chance to slow things down.
And write your book.
Well, that too. Well, the book, like I said, I started writing in 2007. So it gave me a chance to finish it.
Right.
It gave me a chance to really clearly see things without having to rush.
Yeah. Well, I like to ask these healing questions related to your spirituality. And actually, I'm curious if you see yourself as a healer or a seeker when it comes to God and who you are and how you walk through life spiritually.
I would say a seeker. I mean, I definitely acknowledge Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior 100%. But I say a seeker of knowledge. I think God is so powerful in so many ways, right? And that was in Bible study this morning. We're reading Deuteronomy 6 and just going through, you know, trusting the Lord with everything. You know, give the Lord your all, right? When you're praying, when you're eating, before you go to sleep, when you wake up in the morning. And for me, it's every day taking a step forward to that.
Yeah.
talking about it as much as I can with my kids. And I don't want to overdo it, but it's making sure that they're getting those bits and pieces. I think for me, it's being comfortable with that spirituality, with that, I think, search to understand God better, to understand myself better. And also, I've always talked about having this fear of death. So trying to become more comfortable in that through my spirituality and understanding your physical body may die, but your spirit and everything, it goes on, right?
Right.
So really understanding that and trying to lose some of that fear as I seek to understand.
Yeah. That gives me, for me, that awareness gives me a lot of comfort, with the people that I've lost, who aren't here anymore. So is there a way that you're able to describe your knowing of God, like when you really feel the presence of God, like outside of your brain, like outside of your human mind? Is there a time or that you really feel God's presence?
So when I was younger, 1920, when I was early in college, we used to go to church, me and my teammates. And I remember we went to church one time in the Bronx with one of my roommates' parents, and everyone in the whole church was just catching the Holy Spirit. It's just like bouncing through everybody. I'm like, wow, I want to catch it. Like, I want that same feeling to come to me, and it never did. And I'm like, maybe it's me, or maybe I'm not as strong in my faith, or whatever's happening. But when I want to say maybe 30, maybe about 30, because my daughter's 5 years old at the time. And she goes to one of the vacation Bible schools. So she goes to vacation Bible school. My wife and I end up going, and we're sitting outside one night, just looking up at the stars, and I feel like just a different presence, just looking up and recognizing, like, we live good when you can sit out on our lawn and we can look up, we can see the stars, but God is responsible for all. Like, and it really hit me. And her and I, we got baptized together shortly after that. But this level of spirituality, or this, I guess, this feeling or this spirit that comes over you is so real. And how do you take that, and how do you almost, for me, it was like a yearning to have that feeling.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's when I talk about seeking to understand, is seeking that knowledge, that information to have that feeling. Right? And just honestly, it was a feeling that it's almost indescribable if you can't experience it. But it just feels so good.
Yeah. Is there a blessing or a miracle that you've had in your life, an experience that you had nothing to do with that happening, and you said that was just completely God?
That has happened to me so many times.
One that you can share.
Well, I talked about one in the book, right? When we're sitting in the car, I don't know if you got to this part in the book. And at that time, I was having so many issues financially, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at, okay, I got a kid coming, we got all of this stuff going on, I've got an apartment, I've got bills, what do we do? And one of my friends was like, listen, if you want to, you can sell a little bit of drugs. It's not enough to get you caught out here, but you can do this, and as long as you're careful. And when you're young, that makes a lot of sense, And of course I knew better.
Yeah.
But you're in those types of situations, right? And I find myself in this situation, knowing that I shouldn't be there. And I kid you not, I was sitting in the car, one of my best friends and I, and the police pull up behind me. And at the time, that's the furthest away from my mind. As soon as it happens, he looks at me, he says, we're going to jail, right? And I'm preparing myself mentally for what's actually getting ready to happen.
Now, you had something on you at the time?
A whole bunch of stuff.
Okay.
More than enough stuff to easily go to jail and sit there for quite some time. And when a cop comes up to me, first of all, the car just reeked of marijuana. So that was enough right there to just say, hey, get out of the car. Right? Let me search the car. Let me anything. Had they searched the car, there was no way on earth that we weren't going to jail. Right?
Yeah.
But when he comes to the car, all he says was, I smell the marijuana. Why don't you just pull into the driveway and not be parked right here? He said, the weird part, I had lost my wallet. So all I had with me was my graduate school ID.
Yeah.
And I'm like, listen, I lost my wallet, but I have this ID. And he's like, well, you're a graduate student? I'm like, yes, sir. I'm working to get my master's and this and that. And he's like, well, I know that you guys are smoking. So why don't you just pull into the driveway since you're waiting for his sister to get home and let's not worry about it. And he gave my ID and walked away. And as soon as I looked at my friend, I said, that's God 100%. There's nothing that we did. The Spirit came over him and God really made sure that we were safe in this situation.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's happened to me a number, not something like that, but just a number of situations where, my grandmother always said to me, God takes care of fools and babies.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a baby, so I must have been a fool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's funny because as these things have happened to me, one, I've made sure not to put myself into these situations.
Yeah.
But I've also took them as learning opportunities, right?
Mm-hmm.
One, God is real. I can 100% let you know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also putting your trust in, putting your faith in, right?
Yeah.
And just understanding or obeying his commandments, right? And if you're doing that, it's setting you up to live the right way. And that for me, when I was younger, I used to pride myself on doing the wrong things the right way. As crazy as that sounds, if you can be good enough to do something you know you shouldn't be doing, but doing it right, it'll be okay.
Yeah, I get it.
I'm glad to hear you. Because people look at me crazy sometimes.
No.
And I'm like, well, we've all done it, right?
Yeah, you break the rules, but you break them the right way.
You think you're doing a good job at breaking.
Yeah.
But what happened was having kids kind of changed that too.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can't tell my daughter, especially she's 13 now, do something that I'm not doing, right? I've got to lead by example.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really just mindful of my actions. I'm really mindful of everything that I do. I'm not going to say scared, but I'm conscious of the society we live in, everything on social media, everything's going to hit the internet.
Yep.
My biggest fear is being in the newspaper. Look at what this person has done. And no matter how good you do, they're going to hang on that one bad thing. So why put yourself into that situation?
Right. Well, Dr. Gabriel Marshall, I really appreciate this conversation.
Well, I really enjoyed talking. Going through this process, 15 years ago, 25 years ago, had you told me I'd be here, I would have never believed. And this, for me, is all God, right? I would never be here on my own.
Yeah.
And the fact that I am, like, oh, this is the best. So for the next 40, 50, 60 years, I'm going to ride this thing to the wheels fall off. And really just enjoy it.
Thank you for joining us. You can find Gabriel's book, Letters of a Confused Graduate, Volume 1 on Amazon. And remember, you can subscribe to Let's Start Healing on traditional podcast platforms. Until next time, let's start healing.